turns around to me and says, "You carry the bucket, you carry the stool. Don't yell over me. Tap me on the shoulder if you want me to say something else." And as as the cameras are on us and we're walking out. And that was all the instruction Javier Mendez ever gave me about corner coaching at that time. And, they got Alejandro Resley, put his mouthpiece in. We went up, stand around the side. I told him what I wanted him to do. Went back, sat down on the little stools, started the fight, and off we went.
Oh, that's pretty good. I mean, you dropped some names like, Jackson Winklejohn and, and also Holly Holm, who was with the UFC, who was the former bantamweight champion. I mean, and that experience, you're in the country, being the first woman that's not a wife, a girlfriend, a mother, working a corner, especially it's a predominantly male sport, and fighting place. I don't know if I would feel comfortable with some lady in the same room with me trying to change my clothes, but situation you had to do what you had to work with. Again, here, shout out to my man KL. Shout out to him. He says, how many athletes you coach so far, if you know? So what's your, how many athletes you have, as a total since you started?
I would say somewhere around 3,500. In this last summer, we had athletes from 28 states and 4 foreign countries. And this year we have athletes registered from 32 states and 5 foreign countries. And I coach all over the United States and really all over the world. I haven't been to South Africa yet, but I've been just about everywhere else. So I am not like in a traditional wrestling coach that's at a high school or a college and you have 40 to 60 athletes, rotate through every year. I'm not like that. I have people. Well, 1 week I'll have 6 or 7 youth athletes under the age of 12 who are all the very best in the country at their age, weight, and their age and weight. And then I'll be in Vegas working with some jiu-jitsu athletes, and then I'm over at the UFC working with like Paulo Costa, or down in Southern California working with Luke Rockhold. And Cheeto Vera was just there that day, so I worked with Cheeto for a while. I mean, I'm pretty popular. And I'm booked out, but it's hard for me to name all the athletes, especially not all the state wrestling champions or national wrestling champions. And, a lot of, of course, they all go to college, so most of them. So I've coached a lot of people. If you go through our Wrestling Prep Facebook page or my Instagram, you can see a lot of people that especially on the Facebook page, because we used to hold practices in Sunday in California, and 200 to 300 athletes would show up from all over the state and start wrestling about 9 to 10 a.m. and finish at 4 in the afternoon. And we would have, live matches and technique sessions and sequential muscle order to help them, execute their technique. So I'm pretty standalone, both as a male and a female. So I'm probably the only woman coach that coaches 90% men in any kind of wrestling. And then as just a coach who's never been hired by who's never chosen to accept an offer from an institution, I probably stand alone as being the number of people that I coach or people that I've trained over the years.
Well, you have a good talent, and I think it's good to be open so we have more opportunity to teach the ones that's coming up, the ones that are around, and also the experience of learning, especially going around the world. A lot of people thinking in wrestling. See, if you're from the South, there's wrestling and there's wrestling. There's wrestling. Like when we were kids, we wrestled. We used to watch, like after cartoons, you watch wrestling like NWA. Yeah, you watch good old Ric Flair, Chief Wahoo McDaniel.
Oh, great. So do you like WWE and that whole crew? Well, I have to tell you. I don't think I've never remembered to mention this in a podcast, but Miss Elizabeth, do you remember her from the WWE?
Yeah, Macho Man's girl. Yeah, oh yeah, Macho Man's wife. Oh yeah, the Macho Man. Yeah, he was the cream of the crop. With that.
Yeah,
I remember Miss Elizabeth.
That's Elizabeth Hewlett, Liz Hewlett, and she was 2 grades ahead of me in middle school, and we actually both had horses. We rode out in Frankfort, Kentucky at Betty Gaither's Woodland Acres, and she had a horse named Vinegar, and I had a pony that we called Pony. And her mother or my mother would pick us up and drive us back. And then, after she went to University of Kentucky, that she, went on the path to be Miss Elizabeth with Macho Man.
Wow.
So we are both from Frankfort, Kentucky.
Wow, she was a beautiful woman. R.I.P. to Miss Elizabeth.
Yes, she was. And she had a really great brother named Steve, and her mom, I believe, was a single mom and did a really great job with them. Her mother was hardworking and worked in the insurance industry, and a lot of respect for that family.
Wow, that's great. This is like I said, I've been a fan of like I said, I didn't get out the WWF till later because like I said, that used to come on like every when they had a big pay-per-view, they used to have Saturday night special to come on once a Saturday, but with the others, they were on every other weekend. Like like I said, we were with Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes, American Dream, and Magnetin, those guys. Amazing. We had a comment, from Man K. He says, how have you ever wrestled before? No, she hasn't. She learned later on.
I wrestle with them now. I mean, I've wrestled since I started, but I was 42 the first time I ever started coaching.
42. I don't know. I don't know. Oh, I know. Oh, I don't know. That I'm already 50 now. I don't think I could do. I don't know if I could do it when I was 42. And
I still fight. Yes, yeah. I definitely drop kick someone. I think Daniel Cormier tells people sometimes, he'll say to people, or people tell me, he says, "Don't touch her. I watched her punch a grown ass man in the face." So I was at an after party for Daniel's last Strike Force fight, and a gentleman thought, a shirt like this meant put your hand down and grab, and I knocked him, put him right on his, right there on the spot.
Hey, like this, you got to do what you got to do. That's all you can say.
Now, as a Southerner, I have to tell you, on Saturday night when you were watching what you were watching, I was down at Kentucky State University watching Midnight Star and the Kentucky State Marching Band practice. Mm-hmm. And my dad loved the marching band, and I had a guy named Leslie who helped me. He was a student at Kentucky State. And one day he told me, my mother, that he couldn't help me this Sunday or whatever because he was going to be on Soul Train. And I didn't know what Soul Train was. So I made my mother find it. Well, it turned out his sister was the lead singer for one of the lead singers, the woman for Midnight Star. And Midnight Star started at Kentucky State University. So I would go down and listen. And when I moved to Washington, D.C., of course, I'd be right into the land of go-go music. But nobody who was in middle school back then was familiar with EU or, all the stuff that, we listen, Trouble Funk, all that stuff. They had no idea. But to me, it was the music that Leslie play, and then the Kentucky State Marching Band. That just was what I heard. And I had one friend named Sarah Schrader, and she and I would go to functions down at the Capitol Arena, which before, all the names changed for the sports teams in Washington, D.C. And I remember one year we were pulling in, and the guys taking our money said, "You all might be the only white meat we've seen the whole day. Pull in." But we were good.
I know. EU, they're big. They did the doing the butt for the movie School Days with Spike Lee and the Sugar Bear, who's the lead singer. Ow! And I remember that.
Shalimar, Lakeside. All that music I grew up with.
Remember? You ever watch the episode of Chappelle's Show when Charlie Murphy met Prince? It's the episode. It goes like this. This was like years ago. Chappelle's Show had an episode. Charlie Murphy was Eddie Murphy's brother. He was doing a skit. The first one was we met Rick James. Then he did when we met Prince. Now the story goes like this. He was hanging out one day at the club, him and Eddie in the crowd. They met Prince. Prince was hanging out with his crowd, and in that crowd was, remember, Nikki Free, and from Shalimar. He was the new lead singer when Jody Watley left, and he said like this. People thought, Shalimar got a new girl. She found a motherfucker. I said, no, that's not a girl. That was Nikki Free. People thought because remember back then, the dude that looked like a bitch.
Yeah.
Isn't
that funny?
he was like guys like me. Prince was like, if Prince had a mustache with the high heels, he was sexy motherfucker. Like that's true. But yeah, Prince motherfucker, he was getting all the women. We have a comment from my man. Shout out to man K. He says, why coach the men out of curiosity? Because ain't that much women the athletes. But like I said, because
I
I
understand
think
what he's saying. That's not really, what really happened was when I first started, I was helping out at Stanford University in their club program. And Menlo College was close by, and there was a couple of women there who came over. The Fulp Allen girls were very, very successful. But this is like 2006, 2007. And at that time, I think there was a couple of women who had placed at the Olympics, but it wasn't a big sport. And that was just the market. There was no women's wrestling in the middle school or the high schools in California. And California, I think, was the first one that eventually sanctioned women's wrestling. I live in Virginia today, and they just sanctioned women's wrestling this year, literally 20 years later than when I started. And when my daughter wanted to wrestle, she wrestled at the end of her elementary school into middle school. But when it came time for high school to compete against another boy, as a 9th grade girl who had started menstruating because their body fat goes up. Your body fat goes up when you start having your period. And then to be wrestling against a boy who just gotten the first hit of testosterone and their body fat has dropped, no matter how good her technique was, the strength was too much. And it wasn't like in 2006, I threw out a shingle and said, I'm going to be here and I'm going to coach you, come here and we'll have these practices. It morphed into that. And I have coached a lot of really famous women in fighting and in wrestling. The main woman, I'd say probably the most well-known currently is Germaine de Randamie, who was a UFC world champ and a multi-time, maybe double digits world Muay Thai champ out of Utrecht, Netherlands. And then, Lizzie Gevers, I coached Julia Villa a little bit. I've coached a lot of women. And then there was a young girl who started with me when she was maybe 6 or 7. And she worked with me and a bunch of other coaches. I'm not responsible for her success, but she did win a gold medal last year in the Olympics, Amit Elor. So I was part of her, her career when she was in 8th grade, down to when she came back to wrestling. But just to be clear, along with a lot of other people. So, women's wrestling and women's fighting wasn't really something. And at AKA, when I started over there, Germaine was running around when she was over from Europe. And then there was a few other women in and out. And then Uriah Faber had Paige Van Zandt up at his place, but that was like 2.5 hours away. And Cynthia
Cavillo.
Yes. She's from San Jose, but she was also up at Uriah Faber's. And we had some women, Brianna Van Buren, who went on to be really successful in the UFC, Allison Schmidt, who's now Allison Bunch. She didn't go to the UFC, but she fought at Invicta. And we had some other women come through. And just so everybody knows, like AKA is actually owned by Javi's wife, Joanna. She is the owner. And there would be, AKA would not be what it was, without Joanna. So it wasn't like I was avoiding women. I just didn't work with that many women. Now today we'll have, maybe 20% or less of summer camp, or the camps I do when I go around the country are women, but all women are welcome.
Yeah. One thing is like with women, it takes the time for it to get onto something like that, because instead of getting, it's a very Greco-Roman wrestling is a very male dominated sport, but it takes a while. I'm seeing some women doing quicker, like, certain man, she started her own, I think her school of camp a while back. I think she had one of her wrestlers go to the Olympics, I think last year.
That's the same woman I worked with as a child. Sarah started working with her, I believe, 3 or 4 years ago.
And then you have people like in UFC who's pretty good wrestlers, like you look at Julian Pena, also Misha Cupcake Tate. I call her Cupcake Hate Tate. I'm just not a fan of her personally, but yeah, I think everybody has to find their place when they get to any sport. Here we got a comment from he says, He says, "Is Miss Elizabeth still around?" No, she's been gone for almost 20 years, I think. You see like that?
She
Oh,
had passed away
wow.
of an overdose.
Yeah, yeah.
Really,
Also, yeah, he's an idiot.
who
He,
was she with?
she was with Lex Luger.
Lex Luger.
Yeah, because now he's in a wheelchair now. He's working with DDP. He just got get into the WWE Hall of Fame last month
Oh,
at WrestleMania. I used to remember Lex. When we used to wrestle, me and my brothers, I used to do the torture act. My little brother, my nephew's like yeah, and we used to do also the figure four leg lock. Hulk Hogan just had one move, drop the leg, but that was about it. This is my homeboy. He's stupid. He says, "I like competitive session wrestling. That's the sport I look at times." Oh, okay.
that's what I coach. Competitive wrestling.
Yeah. Also, when she's mentioned, what we'll do this while we have it here. We're going to jump into Carolyn's IG. You want to follow her? Reach out. Maybe even interested. Maybe are you an upcoming athlete in wrestling or even in mixed martial arts? You want to reach out to her and work with her, because you're a busy lady. Let her know and show genuine interest, guys. So I'm going to jump into her IG here, and here we go. Here you go. 2 seconds. And here working, and I think one of your students here training right here. What you doing right here?
Harry, so he's using his body in the same sequential muscle order that corresponds to about 85% of the technique that is part of that beats the best math-based opposition an opponent can have. Harry is a sophomore here. He's about 6'1". He's normally weighs 215 to 220. And I was just at his little brother's bat mitzvah this morning, bar mitzvah this morning.
Yeah, becoming a man. Wow, I'm looking at this. I'm hurting. I'm hurting. If I was younger, I mean these,
That's
these
Chris.
kids.
That's Chris Creason. I've coached him for 8 years. He lives in California now. He lived with me. I was his legal guardian for 3 years, and he is extremely good. He was the California state champion last year, and then NHSCA junior champion this year.
Some of these kids amazing. I mean,
well, right there, I taught him how to do all of that, and
wow.
he does that. And when you watch him wrestle live in competitive wrestling, like your audience is asking about, you'll see him use his body in the same way, but apply it to technique. He's committed to West Point to wrestle in college as of right now.
Well, I would say to young man, I don't say thank you to your service to anybody who joins the military. I would say I appreciate the sacrifice he's making, especially being young. My oldest niece and one of my nephews were in the Army. Shout out to them.
Now
here she is also.
Go back. Oh, you can show that. Yep, for sure.
Yeah. Here she is. Who's this young man you're working with?
That's Julian. He's a junior in college, so he's about 6'2".
This is what I saw. She's taking his kid down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. My mom really loved that technique when we were growing up. Because she had to raise me, my younger brother, and my 2 nephews. 5 boys in the house. And
that's a lot.
We're talking about this one here, right here.
Yeah, go over to the left. One more.
Oh,
to the left.
I'll put you over here.
No, not that one. Over one more. Nope.
Okay. Well, one can your left, my right. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Right here.
Yeah. So this guy is a pitching coach for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And about 8 weeks ago, I got an email from him. I think it's in that little blurb there that says, hey, I'm a huge fan. And he called me on the phone and he'd already sent me all these videos from the Dodgers baseball academies where they're already using the same sequential muscle order I teach. They're using what I do. So he asked me if he could come train with me, and I was in Vegas. So he came and met me in Vegas. That Tim crashed out. He's 6'6". He was so tired he fell asleep on the mat. And I took him over to the UFC too. He'd never been to the UFC. So we went over. I took him over to the UFC and showed him around. But he's coming back. They're scheduled to come back or scheduling to come back in September of this year. So he wrote a big article about being there and how he'd been to every baseball convention, but he never learned as much about movement as he did when he came to train with me for a week.
Yeah, 6 feet. Yeah, he's tall. I mean, and I mean, and just I know he's not that much of a younger man. Yeah, you're gonna wear out. I mean, these guys got some
And
abilities
that's
here. I
Wallace
mean,
McCoy, who's a fighter. He's from Murray, Kentucky. He played football D1, and met them. I was doing some coaching in Louisville, and he came over. Then he was supposed to have his pro debut, and this opponent chickened out.
oh yeah.
Didn't show
So he
up
was.
for weigh-in, but here he is, like he's learning to use his body in these ways. So what happens is they get extremely sore, George. But what's more important is they recognize how much of their muscles they're not using, and they're not using it in the correct order. Normally, when they see what the athletes do I work with, they say, "I never can do that," and I say, "You actually can." So we spend a lot of time training stuff they didn't know they could do, and then their technique and their explosiveness, increases dramatically.
Wow. I mean, I wish I could
He's
do it. But I got
200
two.
pounds.
Yeah, I wish I could do it, but I got two bad knees like Stone Cold Steve Austin. And this is cute, the little
Oh yeah,
boy.
Mason. That's Mason Hong from Oregon. He's coming out for 3 weeks this summer and the camp. That's Andrew Morgan, the athlete who was with you, who I've coached since 2013. But Mason is now 6, and he is. I was just out with him at Reno Worlds. He's a really, really fantastic kid who's got that attitude, who tells me before his matches, "Hey, listen, I might not win this match because I haven't won or lost my last match, coach, but this is how you learn." So
He's just a baby. He's doing all
it's just
this.
a baby, isn't he cute?
Just a baby. I mean, it makes me think like I'm a great uncle, and I have nieces and nephews. Some of them about that age. Some a little older than that. And here she is doing some Q&A. If you want to listen to it, I will pull it up here.
This is Coach Carolyn Wester for Wrestling Prep.
I think I'm just
And as we
talking.
roll into camp season and training season, we've had a lot of questions about training at Wrestling Prep. What's it like? Questions about body leveraging, about specific technique, about how it translates. And so what I've decided to do for anyone who's interested, on Sunday, April 13th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we're going to hold a Zoom call. You can sign up. It's easy. If you go to the bio here that says wrestlingprep.com/links, you can click on there in the place to register, and you'll automatically get an email back with all the information. So if you have questions for me, Carolyn Wester, questions about Wrestling Prep, questions about how we train, anything regarding summer camps or training programs, please join us on Sunday, April 13th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks.
Well, yeah, that's great. Good. How was that event that you had? How
It
was
was
it?
good. I was surprised. I thought, we get 2 or 3 people, but I had, I think over 50 people on the phone, and we answered a lot of questions, and we went for 2 hours, and people had good questions, and I think it was, very helpful for people. I hope.
Yeah. Here you got some comments. This is from my man. He says this. You should look at the video. He says, yeah, he has agility. Yes, he did. They do all. Amazing. Also says, Carolyn, you can take me down anytime. Oh God, he's like, you gotta watch out for.
That's I used to, when you're on dating apps and people, now I just say I'm an athletic consultant, but I used to say coach, and they're like, "What do you coach? Wrestling?" "Oh, you want to wrestle with?" I'm like,
I tell you,
knock you out.
Yeah, I tell you, doing my content, especially within the bodybuilding, I have heard stories and guys like we get on social media. Like one thing I tell, in my interviews, I say, guys, we follow these ladies. Here's one of my rules: no D pics. Don't send that shit to them. Be respectful, because you know what, you're doing something that's seriously your life and your career, your job, and you enjoy what you're doing. But people need to be open-minded, understand that. I know also, like again, there's always anything can be sexualized. It's easy to be sexualized, something, especially wrestling. I remember when we were kids, especially when we were boys, we used to wrestle each other. And sometimes the girls want to fight and wrestle, but yeah, remember it says again, girls are going to the age when they're starting, menstruating, body started changing. Boys, our body started changing, and we wrestle with girls. The girls going all out. We just copping a feel. So we're pervy that way. We're boys here. Shout out to a man. He says, "What a lot of muscle training with your knees." Yeah, I can't do it. My knees, I got 2 bad knees like Stone Cold Steve Austin. Right now I am thinking about getting knee surgery on ones like bone on bone. But that's something I will say really helps, especially if you're somebody who just wants to get in better shape. and to train because good to learn movements and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. We have a if you're bored one day or someone's bored and they go through my Instagram, they're going to see reels of people that are in their 40s and 50s doing this same movement. And I work with a lot of people online. If you're not somebody who wants to be in an MMA gym or a wrestling gym there's really not wrestling gyms for adults, but in an MMA gym or a BJJ gym, some of them work with me online and they're always like, should I do 30 minutes or an hour? I think I can do an hour. I'm like, let's do 30 minutes the first time. And then after about 10 minutes, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I didn't ask for 60 yet. But you need to, if you have knees, like I have a ripped meniscus at both knees, and the only thing left for me to do would be to have my knees replaced. So I cortisone up and just go back to it. But I work the muscles in my quads and my hamstrings and my calves in a specific order so I could push from the top of my calf to my lower hamstring to my upper glute without activating my knee. So my knee is never registering the full weight. I'm bypassing it with a straight line from my lower hamstring to the top of my calf. So if somebody is injured and they're interested in working online, then I'm happy to do it with them.
Yeah, that's good because I think that's one thing. Online coaching has really blown up. I think mostly because during the pandemic, it was tough for a lot of people to be in. Like I know, especially they limited the amount of people inside of a gym, or it was tough. But I think it broadened opportunities because
I lucked out. One day I get this call from Daniel Cormier, and he said, "Yeah, well, it's yes." We sort of like siblings, like a little bickering. So anyway, so he said to me, "Hey, Carolyn, are you all do you have a nonprofit too?" And I said, "I do." And then the next thing I know is one of the managers he works with reached out to me, Danny Rubenstein, and said, "Hey, Daniel has got this gig with the UFC, and for every piece of work he does, he gets a cut, and he wants to donate it all to Wrestling Prep." So during the pandemic, we coached over 1,200 individual athletes for free online because of Daniel turning that whole UFC sponsorship of him into the Wrestling Prep nonprofit. So it's very kind and very generous of him. He is one of by far my biggest supporters, and he is I trust him emphatically because he did something one time that could have lost him his entire sponsorship that was paying all his bills and for his wife at the time, Lena, and their children, in order to stand up to somebody who thought sending pictures and comments like you're describing to my phone was okay.
Yeah, because that thing is, again, people out there, understand she's doing something that's really serious. And I know guys out there, because I got some comments here, I'm not going to show them because I want to respect you because you're a lady. And I'm a Southern gentleman, ma'am. I want to respect you. There
you go.
Yeah. But people need to understand.
My grandmama would be so happy.
Yeah. My mother, she raised, like I said, she had to raise 5 boys. And we had to learn. We love her. Like, Mother's Day coming this weekend, and it's going to be 6 years since my mother passed. Because I was like your situation. My mother was sick. I was taking care of her for a long time. And I started doing this content just because I was mostly focused on bodybuilding. But I met a friend of mine. His name is Shelton Harris. And he does content on MMA and mixed martial arts. And we said, George, well, do what you like to do. And I started talking bodybuilding. Also, I was doing some good bit stuff with MMA and stuff like that. But because a lot of my focus on bodybuilding, it's hard to get some contacts and get some interviews. But I got the opportunity to interview a couple of young ladies who just did who fought on Invicta last month. Joy Kendall and also Jamie Inden. And Joy is a BJJ expert. Tell me this: what makes the difference between BJJ and wrestling?
Yeah, I think for women. For women, I would say is less physical, less colliding. There's less colliding with your opponent as opposed to manipulating them with a gi or even without a gi. So a lot of times I'll give you a perfect example. Javier Mendez asked me to work with his BJJ practitioner at AKA, and he was going to be in this tournament. And I said, tell me what normally happens. Well, the match starts, the bout starts, and they grab my gi and then they pull me down. And I'm like, oh, so what's the criteria for who grabs whose gi first? Like parterre and freestyle wrestling. And he said, oh, no, there isn't. He just grabs it. I'm like, don't let him grab your gi. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, put your arm up at 90 degrees and take him down with your left hand. And he was like, well, wonder if they run into your arm. They run into your arm. I mean, like, it was so gentle compared to what we would do in wrestling or in fighting. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, it's this gentle, but not gentle, like it's not wimpy. It's just more gentle than wrestling. And in wrestling, we anticipate if we're going to take someone down, the likelihood of us grabbing their leg and pulling it up, like ankle picking without any of our body touching them, much less doing a double leg or a drive up single, which we do in fighting, or a sweep single. We're gonna collide. You're gonna collide. And you can't shut your eyes and you can't flinch. You have to be prepared to hit them. Yeah, and that's a little bit different than BJJ. And then BJJ practitioners are taught to do takedowns in a highly ineffective manner. And that's what's I probably do 30%, 40% of my coaching now at BJJ facilities and gyms around the country. And they're just so shocked that how much better they can shoot, but that they actually have to collide with the person. So let's take Helen Maroulis, and what a legend in women's wrestling, right? She's an Olympic gold medalist, 2-time bronze medalist, and she went and competed in her first, IBJFF World Championships, and she won because she could take everybody down. Every time she attempted a takedown, she would take them down because she's been taking people down since she was 8 years old. So, a lot of the things in BJJ is you're expecting the person can't take you down, or they don't come close to your body when they attempt to take you down, and you have a counter that involves circling and pulling, and Helen is well prepared for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
she can shoot one way and head the other, and you're going to be like, well, I don't know what just happened to me. And I think a woman, Victoria Anthony, who's also a legend in women's wrestling, I think she's the same way in BJJ. And then Amit Elor, she trains BJJ, and she's competed in Brazil and major events, around the world.
Yeah,
I think if I'm, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think even Sarah McMahon might own a BJJ studio.
Probably because it's BJJ is probably one of the disciplines that's really I would say foregrounds for mixed martial arts. Because remember the Gracie family originally owned the UFC. Hoist used to always wrestle his gi, and that's the thing, grabbing that gi. And I think every style is different. If you look at it, especially look at wrestling, it's more. You still get more physical because you do more grabbing, you got more holding, you're really moving around more and I think it's more. I think it's more of a test of strength compared to jiu-jitsu. Would you say that? Like, which
depending on what your situation is. And let me be clear, I am so glad the BJJ movement is such a part of the American landscape for people who train after school, after work, because there are not wrestling gyms you go to as an adult. You don't normally learn to wrestle as an adult. And here's this BJJ movement where you can go to a studio with your children, with your spouse. They're probably going to have a class that works for all of you at your level. You're going to be welcome, and you're out there moving your body for 60 to 120 minutes, 3 times a week, that you probably, if you're an ex-wrestler, probably don't have an opportunity to go out and do that unless you're volunteering at a high school or at a club practice. But believe me, there's no comparison between the cardiovascular workout of walking around and coaching. I mean, you're going to get your steps in, but your heart rate is not going up like riding legs with somebody and turning them. So I'm grateful for the BJJ movement. I think it's something that we should really foster more of in the United States. I don't know if you know that in Hawaii they don't have. I hear what is his name? Lee. He was a 2-time NCAA champ from Cornell. I can see his face, university. But he told me when he was growing up, they had wrestling in elementary school, but when you go to high school, it's judo. And he learned to wrestle off of, like VHS tapes that is, that they bought online, like, Dave Baumgartner's whatever, series or whoever, Mean Gene, what I mean, Head Threads or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like he learned that way because it wasn't available.
Yeah.
But the BJJ movement is great for American health.
Yeah, one of the top wrestlers out of Hawaii is Lane McFarland, because she's pretty known for wrestling. I think was it BJ Penn did a lot of wrestling. I think it was more standard than
Bellator, right?
BJ also did UFC. He was in the early days.
I thought you were a woman who was in Bellator.
Yeah. It's BJ Penn, but
BJ Penn.
BJ Penn.
Like McFarland.
Yeah, Lee McFarland. Yeah, that's Bellator. Yeah, also I think she might have retired because I think she's over now with PFL. They got, they bought out the Bellator.
PFL, works out. They've been good to my guys so far, but a lot of our fighters that were in Bellator never got a fight. And Aaron Pico, who I know his family well, I'm not responsible for his successes, but he just signed with UFC. He didn't go to PFL. He went from, or maybe he didn't one fight at PFL, but he was with Bellator and he went right to the UFC.
Yeah, I know they're looking at someone like I think Dakota, the Vijica. They look at her probably maybe the future because she's just won the a while back. She won the PFL flyweight tournament. She beat. You heard about Talia Santos getting busted. I mean, she was close to beating my girl. She was close, but she just needed to clean her act. We got here. Shot time man. K says, do you have your athletes do the butterfly pose to work on flexibility when it comes to the knees? So what's the training regimen?
We do sequential body leveraging. So it was that kind of interesting in that article that Clayton Thompson from the Dodgers wrote. He said that the athlete I brought with me to work with him, Ben, was jacked, doesn't lift any weights, can do the complete splits, but he doesn't do any stretching. He just goes through our routine of body leveraging because you start using all your muscles in order. So the flexibility is muscle order over flexibility. And so I'll give you an example. There's an athlete who was a 2-time USA this past Olympics and the one before diver, Brando Lashavio. And he asked me to be on his podcast. And I was describing how it takes, I'll teach someone to build a structure with their body, then lower their back down so they could take their arms to the side and touch the ground beside them, as opposed to putting their hands over their head. And he's like, that just seems impossible. I said, well, take off your headset and we'll do it right here. And I literally walked him through how to do it. And I helped him build a structure with his body that was so strong from his hip bones to his glutes and calves that he was able to use his transverse ab right about right at the where, like maybe where his underwear line would be, and literally just lower himself down by taking that muscle back while keeping the other muscles engaged. So people think that what I do is a form of gymnastics, but gymnasts who come to me, male or female, when I ask them, because I admire gymnastics, but gymnastics is a sport where you're scored based on the shapes you make in the rotations you complete. And they actually, if you go slightly out of what the judges believe is the correct form, then you have negative points. What I do is asking the muscles to work in the order. So when you collide with someone or you need to get away from them, you have maximum torque and velocity. So you might learn to backflip as a gymnast growing up, or you take gymnastics. And then when I have you do it, it's completely different. And they're like, I am so sore. I've never used any of these muscles to backflip or take my body backwards in the order you do, because I'm just doing it not because I think it's cool, even though it really is, but because I watched wrestling for so long and I would see parents and coaches getting mad at kids. And their answer, George, was when they couldn't do it was, you're not working hard enough or you're not trying. And it wasn't, is there another way? And so there would be an adult. There's a guy from, are you in North Carolina?
Yeah, North Carolina, yeah.
So CC Fisher, who wrestled for Riverside and went to UNC, he's the first coach that ever really encouraged me to do all these things. So CC, who at the time was maybe in his late 20s, early 30s, he would be executing technique, and there would be a 14-year-old who he's trying to teach it to, and he's showing him what he's doing. And the dad or mom is screaming, "You're lazy. You don't want it." I'm like, he is a grown ass man who's been at the Olympic Training Center for 4 years. Your son isn't using, or daughter's not using those same muscles in that same order. So I thought if I could teach them how to use those muscles, their ability to execute technique will be so much better. And then over time, I stopped trying to have them execute the technique that I saw everybody else doing, because I could see that there was potentially a better, more higher likelihood of success way to do some things. And I was amazed that they didn't teach according to body structure, right? So, you've coached athletes, athletes. Some people have long torsos and short legs, like Cain Velasquez. His body is, 3/4 of his body, and his legs are 1/4. He's got these little legs. And then you've got somebody like John Jones, whose legs are 1,000 feet tall and his torso is a little bit shorter. It's not the big representation. It's not symmetrical, 1/2, 1/2. So how you would stand up if you have another person of your same weight on top of you, if you've got long legs, you have to come up completely different than somebody has short legs. Because I have short legs, I can pull my leg up underneath me because it's short. But if my body was 1/4 of my legs, trying to get my legs up to stand up is a whole different deal. And that's what I saw from the get-go. And I just didn't try to learn the other things that had been traditional. I just did what I saw. And then people started having immediate results, and then it just turned into what it is today.
I remember just something, because as you know, I post a lot of bodybuilding. I follow, like, one of my favorite bodybuilders, especially when I was growing up, was Arnold. This guy's neck, it's not a tumor. But he was talking about how when I started training, I used to, because I'm 6 feet tall, I couldn't do bench presses because I couldn't do squats because I am taller. But he had a friend, Franco Colombo. Franco was like about 5'4", 5'3". So he can do squats because he was shorter. He had to do front squats because he was taller. He had to take the squats and come from the front. Instead of when you go into the back, you have to go down. Because, I used to, when I lift weights, I'm like 5, at the time it was coming up, I was maybe 5'6", 5'7", and it'll take me to do squats, but it's a lot harder when you're taller because your body's built differently. And that's the thing about parents. Those parents, I know I never had children. I had help in my niece and nephew's raising. Children, you don't put that much pressure on them.
No.
That's what causes some kids to have issues. You are their parents. You're the person supposed to love them. Tell them, say, baby, what's wrong? What you need help with? Sit down and talk. That's saying you're trying to live your life through them. That's not what you're supposed to do. Let them live yours. You already lived your life. And if you want to do things like this, then you can do it now because you're grown now. I've talked to ladies who are bodybuilders who are in their 50s and 60s. And they said, I started doing this when I was in my 50s and 40s because you know what? Now I can do what I want because my children are grown. That responsibility. Your kids are grown. And I know they love what your mama's doing because, you're doing something. You're getting something that I think is totally, instead of getting, like I do interviews related to bodybuilding, it's totally out of the realm of what is traditional for a woman. And I remember there was a way she was a boxing coach and manager. And I think who was it? I think it was Meg Ryan, or was it somebody played a movie about her?
Meg Ryan
Meg Ryan.
Maybe Tyrese or somebody.
No, it was Omar Epps. Yeah, Omar Epps. Yeah, I remember that movie. And that's based on a true story. You're seeing women get into things like there's a woman now as a coach in the NFL. There's women working with the in baseball. I think women are finding their place because you know what, society is more open. It's going to always be a men's society because you know what, even though this is truthfully, y'all women make up the majority of the population, but still men are always going to have the issue and have control.
I find that I don't have any problem with male fighters or wrestlers, especially when I put my hand on them the first time, because I am so strong and they understand, they can feel that I have control, that I can control movement, control their movement. The people that have the most problem with me are men that are older and who could completely be upset if their daughter or their son's wife was discriminated against for women, but don't recognize that they still do it towards women who are their age. And they find it problematic. I have plenty of people say to me, I think you're a great coach. I just I don't believe that a woman should be a coach, or I don't believe. But the thing that always makes me laugh is, perfectly well, if they're driving across the country, they're in a car accident and they go to the ER, and the cardiac surgeon or the orthopedic surgeon is going to save their kid's life is, a transgender Filipino, whatever the problem is with they don't like, they'd be so grateful for them to operate on them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of prejudice is selective as to whether or not they need the person. And I don't think everybody recognizes that they do that. But what was been interesting for me is just the assumption that I am a coach, that I'm not well educated, or I live at a certain level. And this is my view from my place where I live. This is my, sheep.
That's
I'm
nice.
Yeah, yes. And people are talked down. And so a lot of times they'll want to call me at late at night and talk about or scream about their kids thing. I'm like, hey, it's late and I was with your athlete all weekend. Can we do it later this week? And they'll be, no, this is when I want to do it. And I'm like, well, it doesn't work for me. And they'll say, well, maybe this won't work for me. So that's cool. Right.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. It's like that scene from Dark Knight Rises when that guy's talking junk to Bane and says, do you feel that? You think you have control over me? He said, I give you a lot of money to teach my kid, and you think that's power over me? I mean, I think some people need to really be open-minded. Even I have my prejudice, but
it's really interesting. Years ago in California, this coach called me. He was mad because one of his athletes that he had released, I helped him find a new place, and he said to me, well, I'm the head coach at such and such university. I think you need me. And I said, I had 800 kids here for the last 3 weeks. I think you need me. And he said, do you know why everybody hates you? And I said, no. And he said, because they can't fire you. We can't get you fired. And I said, I realized that for someone that's in their mid to late 40s to come into this sport and be able to make 4 or 5 times what you make without having to have a job with an institution would be extremely frustrating. However, that's not my problem in any way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the thing is people have
now that guy and I are friendly. You know what I mean? Like, people change.
Friendly, not friends. There's difference between hey, how you doing? He said, that motherfucker, I can't stand it. But yeah, that's the big difference. And I think people need to learn that. I think if you're a person who knows basically, excuse my language, man, know your shit, it shouldn't matter what sex you are, what color you are, what gender you are, whatever. It's just if you're open and willing to be educated and open and willing to learn, just be open-minded. Like, it's just about understanding. That's one thing I talk about on my content is that be willing to understand and be willing to wonder. Like, athletes tell me that they're coaches and trainers, and they have people telling them, hey, I don't want my daughter to be as big and muscular as you. But if you don't follow the work, if you're not consistent, not disciplined,
not eating to feed your muscle.
Yeah, because that's one thing. That's like in bodybuilding. You need to eat. You need to feed. It's one difference between that because it's part of the process. Like back in the day, these wrestlers just starved themselves to try to make weight for competitions. Sometimes, some guys even develop eating disorders because of that.
Yes.
But now you got to realize
in wrestling.
Yeah, you got to realize that it's important to feed the body. You have to have a diet. You have to eat the right things. Like, this is something I'm asking, especially being a fat man. What do you like? Especially you're not a competitor, but what do you like to do when you're like, especially at home when you're cooking? What's that thing you love?
Yesterday I made salmon. Today I made some tuna. I like to make bison with sun-dried tomatoes and onions and mushrooms. And I try to eat like that. I have to eat a fair amount of protein to keep muscle, on my body. And so, and it's gotten a little bit harder as I've gotten older to keep as much muscle as I've been able to keep. I don't lift, but I move people around. And just in the last year, have I started to seek outside exercise besides just wrestling, because I could just feel that I needed it, because of age. But it's just part of the process. If you're going to coach people, you're going to have to eat well, and you're going to have to, and I love any steak, but you're going to have to eat well, and you're going to, have to self-analyze. Is this working? And is my weight going up? Is my weight going down? Is my ratio to muscle increasing? Am I drinking enough water? Why is my stomach upset? Do I need some kefir and get out of the dairy? What is it? And a lot of people don't like to play that game because they're working and they're raising kids and doing other stuff. They don't want to put that much time into food, especially if they're already feeding children or taking care of somebody else in the process. It's hard to go, okay, this meal's for me. Now this meal's for me. What? It's 9 o'clock. I have to be up at 5. Just the day goes flying by.
Yeah, because I do, like, a lot of ladies who I interview are mothers like yourself who have kids and responsibilities. They have to prep them. Sometimes the kids like to eat the prep food with their parents, but generally most of the kids, especially like you got a little 6-year-old. I don't know if he wants to eat broccoli and salmon every day. He likes to have a little burger every now and then, and everybody has things that helps in their process.
You and I were raised by mothers who didn't ask us what we wanted to eat.
They fed us.
They fed us, and that was that's the way it was. I mean, we didn't have any. I mean, I've been at summer camp before, and kids will come up and go, I don't like what they have in this dining hall. There's like 4 different options there. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, are you going to do something about it? And no, absolutely not. Call your mom, have them come get you. Right.
Yeah.
Get a plane ticket, head home. I'm not doing that. And I think that's also part of the problem with kids today. Plus the internet is just giving them so many options to see. And there's a big sense of martyrdom of kids who start wrestling who are mediocre, like in a mediocre program. I don't mean mediocre like it's not great that they're wrestling. They're just not a top 3 school like Blair or SEM or one of those programs. They're just, okay in their area. Well, they love to say, oh, I've had to cut weight. Oh, I haven't had water in 4 days. Oh, it's like this big martyrdom. And then they post it all over social media with this food porn. And then as soon as they get through weigh-in, they're shoving down, ice cream and donuts, and then they wonder why they gas out in the first period, and they're teched in 24 seconds or something ridiculous.
Yeah, I know a lot of bodybuilders who are foodies. They love food porn. They love like watching. Some eat good stuff, but then they love watching stuff where I feel watching this one thing where the guy took honey buns and seasoned them, wrapped with bacon, and smoked them. And I think I can find that link. I seen it to you. It looks good. I mean, it looks good. I mean, but
no. I have one athlete. He's an adult now. His name is PJ Clee.